Right now, if we're going to talk about purges, I wonder what we make of the former head of Britain's equalities watchdog, Trevor Phillips, being suspended from the Labour Party as they investigate various allegations of Islamophobia. Phillips, who previously chaired the Equality and Human Rights Commission, said he was informed that he was being investigated over past comments, including remarks about the abuse of young girls by Pakistani Muslim men in towns like Rotherham, and what was the other one I mentioned, the failure of some Muslims to wear poppies on Remembrance Sunday. Labour said it takes all complaints of Islamophobia extremely seriously. It's possibly worth mentioning that Trevor Phillips was a serious critic of Labour in its lacklustre approach to claims of anti-Semitism within the rank and file. But as I said earlier, that Phillips himself seems to refute all of this, saying, he's not a racist, but he then made that remark that Muslims aren't like us, which I found rather troubling. Here to discuss, Miqdaad Versi, spokesperson for the Muslim Council of Britain. He joins us on the line now. Good afternoon to you, sir.
Good afternoon.
It's I suppose I'm conflicted about this because Trevor Phillips seemed to have done such great work back in the day. What were your concerns about his comments about Muslims? Some of these past comments, Miqdaad.
I think the reality is the number of comments he's made about Muslims in the recent past are seriously problematic. What we have to think about is, as you rightly pointed out, his framing is Muslims are not like us. That's his frame on all of this stuff. He for example, and the way that he does this is, everyone can have different views, but he says, for example, the way that Muslims are different is, for example, that we don't report terrorism when we see it in our midst. But the evidence that he cites actually shows the opposite. He says that Muslims have sympathy with terrorists, but we don't, and there's lots of evidence which demonstrates that not to be the case. When a Christian girl was put into foster care and the parents were Muslim, he called that akin to child abuse, when actually, that family was actually a very loving family and reporting on this. He consistently talks about Muslims as unable to integrate with the rest of society. But the evidence shows that Muslims are integrating like everybody else.
Can I just... Just on... Because so the actual quote he gave to a radio station earlier this morning is, he says, I'm kind of surprised that what is and always has been an open democratic party decides that its members cannot have a healthy debate about how we address differences of values and outlooks. And he concludes by saying, they say I'm accusing Muslims of being different. Well, actually, that's true. The point is Muslims are different. And this is the bit that I really wanted to hear your thoughts on, Miqdaad. And in many ways, I think that's admirable. Now, I understand, I believe, where you're coming from, and I share your views, but it's just at that twist at the end when he says, I think it's admirable. Can he be sort of guilty of sort of racistly denigrating Muslim brothers and sisters when he then says, actually, I think their differences are admirable?
Well, all of the evidence suggests the opposite. When you look at his statements historically, he may choose to use one phrase in one place to try and almost hide everything else. But we have to look at the evidence and the outcomes of what he's saying. I mean, if you look at any statement he's made about Muslims over the last 5 years, you can Google it, look for it, make your own judgment, you will see consistently the same idea. That Muslims are not just different in a bad way, but in a dangerous way. And he does this again and again and again. So whilst he might say once that, oh, that's a good thing, all his writing, all his public statements suggest the opposite. And that's what we have to look at. Not when he's being criticized, what he tries to respond with, but what he's been saying when he's had the platform, when it's his column out there. And it's really dangerous because the statements and the framing that he puts together were literally copied word for word by people like Tommy Robinson. They got it's the way that the far right look at this, and if you try and understand, as of course many people do, what are the far right thinking right now when it comes to Muslims? They're focused on Muslims. That's a lot of the far right concern right now. Is Muslims are different because they don't report terrorism, because they're different, because they have sympathy with these terrorists. They're different from all of us. Literally, the wording that Trevor Phillips uses and the framing that he uses is the framing of the far right, and it's what the far right use. They've literally, Tommy Robinson actually copied and pasted, if you like, the words from Trevor Phillips in his public statements. I mean, that's really dangerous. And we just have to be honest about that and say, you know what, this is not something that can be just swept under the carpet. And many Muslims will say, who've heard Trevor Phillips talk in this way in the past, will probably say things like good riddance. But this is obviously an internal question for the Labour Party. I'm not going to get involved in their own process.
No, very, very wise.
which have their own issues.
Miqdaad, here's Kevin for you.
I just wanted to ask you, Miqdaad, why these are charges relating back 5 years. The Labour Party now says it's a question of urgency, a matter of urgency that Trevor Phillips is suspended. Why have they done this now? Why didn't they do it 5 years ago?
I think some of these are within the last year or two, but yes, you're right. Some of these have happened longer ago. I can't answer for the Labour Party. I have no idea why they've chosen now to do it. There may be lots of reasons, and their own rationale for choosing to do so is one I can't justify. Maybe someone complained about it recently and therefore they responded to it. I don't know. But all I can say, but if you actually notice, a lot of the suspensions that have happened in the Labour Party for a range of different things have been due to things that they said a long time ago. And I look, because people...
I agree with that, yeah, I've got you there, yeah.
But the thing is, I don't know. I mean, Labour Party will have to answer that question, but reading from the side, it looks like someone's complained about it. That's probably why they've looked at it now.
Well, their machine is not famous for moving quickly. Can I just ask you one thing, just for clarity? You are saying that the former chair of the Equalities and Human Rights Commission is guilty of Islamophobia.
I am saying that these statements are clearly problematic when it comes to Muslims, and whatever definition of Islamophobia, of racism, of discrimination, of hatefulness, of problematic statements when it comes to Muslims you want to use, if someone says things that are the same narrative as the far-right Islamophobes, we have a serious problem.
Gosh, it's just... You can appreciate, I'm sure, Miqdaad, that for two white guys to sit in the room thinking, I have a Muslim man talking about a black man, and if we're going to go down and say, he is an Islamophobe, Islamophobia is a form of racism, so we're saying that Trevor Phillips, a former chair of the Equalities Commission, is racist, which is, kind of a difficult thing for me to get my head around, Miqdaad. But
I think this is the point. Well, the point is to look at the evidence and make the judgment based on what you see. I mean, I've written, you may have seen, I put a thread together. I've explained, my views, and I think that if someone looks at the evidence and they come to their own conclusion, it's not impossible for someone of any background to have a view about Muslims which is highly problematic, and that's all we're saying here. And I think that many people from actually black communities and Muslim communities over the last few years will probably say that their views of Trevor Phillips is not massively positive.
I'm gonna leave you with just a little dilemma or a little thought I've got in my own mind. So Jeremy Corbyn's amongst the many allegations of anti-Semitism that have been levelled at him, and I'm not too sure how many stand water, was him apparently not recognising various sort of anti-Semitic tropes in a painting of Jewish bankers, or bankers I should say. Trevor Phillips, is actually said comments, which quite clearly from talking to you, Miqdaad, have caused offence. It's a clumsy way of putting it, but having seen Jeremy Corbyn hauled over the coals by all newspapers for alleged anti-Semitism or his own anti-Semitic thoughts, would you say that Trevor Phillips looks like a more troubling case than Jeremy Corbyn, but in regards to racism, but from an Islamophobic perspective?
I don't like making comparisons because there are lots of different reasons why comparisons are potentially problematic. Yeah. I think that, someone can look at Jeremy Corbyn and make their own judgment as to what he said and what he's done. I am talking about specifically things that Trevor Phillips has said. And he is happy to stand by his comments and, call Muslim foster parents akin to child abusers. That type of thing. If he wants to say that, and he has said that, he hasn't apologized, he hasn't had any concern, he hasn't said he's sorry for anything that he's said. And I think that on a unique basis, on a case-by-case basis, looking at Trevor Phillips and saying all of these things, I cannot see how people cannot come to a conclusion that what he has said is hugely problematic and is not just massively offensive, but, I can't see how people wouldn't say that he's cherry-picking and discriminating and having double standards when it comes to Muslims, which he doesn't do to other faiths, and that is the very definition of racism. So, we have to just be honest about the actual facts in this case and judge the case on its merit.
I hear you. Miqdaad, thank you. I would point our listeners to Miqdaad Versi is his name. You can find him easily on Twitter. He's done a great thread. And also, if you'll forgive me for saying so, a friend of the show, Saeed Avasi, the Tory peer, has also done an excellent thread. Really nails the issue. So if you've still got any lingering doubts about Trevor Phillips and the Labour Party's decision to suspend him, and looking on Twitter, I would say it seems that 9 out of 10 posters do have question marks about it. Mind you, 9 out of 10 posters seem to have the flag of St George and a lot of numbers after their name.